Welcome to my case study on my student Jonas, in which we focused on reading comprehension. Jonas is 16 years old and just finished the 10th grade. He says he had a really hard time with distance learning, but he managed. Jonas was diagnosed with ADHD in elementary school and anxiety in middle school. He is medicated for both and has been receiving counseling for his anxiety on and off since middle school. His mother is a teacher at his high school and informed me that he reads at approximately a 7th to 8th grade level. She's very involved with Jonas's education and his IEP process. She's been teaching for about 25 years, so I really trusted her on the information she gave me. After his initial assessment, I developed his PLAP, which reads above, and 3 IEP goals. I ended up focusing on just one, which is included here. Based on the first Pearson IRI I conducted with Jonas, and I'll discuss a little bit later, I decided that we would be focusing on oral reading comprehension and building his toolkit. His comprehension scores were much better on the silent reading evaluation, so I thought that because he's so focused on saying words correctly and being able to just get through the paragraph, that he doesn't really take in what he's read. He is anxious about getting the words wrong, but also gets easily distracted. Later on in our intervention process, I conducted a student interest and priorities inventory and found that Jonas has the same general ideas as me, particularly when it comes to him losing focus while he reads. He said, "My eyes just get tired of looking at the words." In order to track whether or not Jonas was making progress, I decided to conduct an IRI after each lesson, focusing on literal text comprehension questions with a few inferential comprehension questions included as well. The first time Jonas and I met, I conducted a Pearson informal reading inventory. Knowing that Jonas has ADHD and that we would be doing our lessons and interventions via Zoom, I decided it would be best to conduct his assessments at that 7th grade level in order to combat the added obstacle of remote learning and dealing with distractions at home. In his first IRI, I conducted both a silent reading and an oral reading assessment. His silent reading comprehension score, while still being classified as instructional, was significantly better than his oral comprehension score. So this is what I decided to focus on. We can see here that he read 248 words correctly in the passage, or 15 words incorrectly. This places him as instructional under the Pearson IRI classifications. In his comprehension questions, which was made up of 4 literal, 4 inferential, and 1 word meaning question, he got 4 out of 9 correct, placing him as frustrational. The combination of these 3 results led me to believe that 7th grade would be the best level to stay at moving forward. If I had further resources and experience, I would have targeted his skills with reading materials designated as early 7th grade. Included here is an example of what the IRI looks like, and this is the first one that I conducted on Jonas. We can see that the reading passage itself is just over 200 words and is split up pretty big. I had put it into a Word document so that Jonas could manipulate the text as needed. He does wear glasses because he doesn't have very good vision, so this way he could make it larger if he needed and scroll on his own computer rather than having me share my screen on Zoom, and we found that this worked really well. What I really like about the Pearson IRIs is that it shows you which questions are literal and inferential, and that it does sneak in that word meaning question. So based on his initial assessment results and the discussion Jonas and I held throughout, it seemed to me that Jonas doesn't have a substantial toolkit. He knows how to read, he just doesn't know how to go about retaining the information other than just through memorizing it. I have a theory that his ADHD has a significant impact on his memory, particularly in areas that don't necessarily interest him. With some research and understanding Jonas and his needs, I decided that these 2 particular methods would be helpful to him. It seemed to me that Jonas wasn't taking the time to consider what the text was saying beyond getting the words out. Included here is 2 links to the studies that back up these lesson types that I wanted to use and explains them a little bit further. So with what I mentioned before, as well as understanding Jonas and his ADHD and just how he learns in general, I decided to go with the mental imagery intervention lesson first, just because I felt like with it being new and our lessons having that novelty to it, he would be more interested and engaged throughout the lesson and would therefore retain the information better. And I feel like it suits his learning style the best. And I'm really grateful that I did end up doing it first, and he was super successful with it. And I'll talk more about that next. So in this intervention, I used excerpts from the text Little Women, which is included in the recommended reading by the Common Core text exemplar. We practiced this new reading strategy with the text, and then I had him use the same strategy on an additional IRI performed at the end of the intervention. This was great, and his scores increased dramatically, particularly his comprehension scores, as you can see. With this method, he was able to score 100% on his comprehension questions, and the line looks kind of straight, but he did go up about a percentage on words that he read correctly. Just as a brief, what mental imagery is, it's just you read the paragraph, you imagine it in your head. When we did it, I had him draw pictures for me on the Zoom whiteboard, and I drew some and we talked about it. But it's about taking your time to let the scene develop in your head. I think it's particularly effective for literary texts rather than informational texts. And later on, Jonas would tell me that this was his favorite method that he learned. So I was super impressed with his scores and his progression. It was like crazy impressive, but I was really worried about it just being a super good day and a bit of a fluke. So I chose to stay on this reading level when I moved to the next item to add to his toolkit. Additionally, this would offer some reinforcement to his last lesson, hopefully providing more evidence that he's able to read at that higher level by showing how solidly he is at grade level 7. So in this intervention, I again used excerpts from Little Women as the reading felt appropriate to his level and the student enjoyed the story. Ask, Read, Tell includes a worksheet that students fill out and refer to before, during, and after the reading. After teaching Jonas this strategy, we did 2 IRIs, once with the worksheet and once without. We can see in the first attempt where he filled out the sheet that he performed the same or better than the previous intervention, but when he didn't have the sheet, his scores take a dip downwards. This is also the final chart for Jonas's data collection. So afterwards, Jonas and I discussed why he felt like he didn't do as well that second time through. We both felt that Ask, Read, Tell could be more beneficial with informational texts, but that it doesn't apply as well to literature, and that it's a better fit for a group setting or discussion rather than individual work as well. I think it does have the potential to be beneficial if we take the general idea and just modify it. So rather than asking ourselves questions about the text ahead of time, we can instead ask ourselves questions while we read and look for answers as the text goes on, especially with literature rather than informational. I think, in particular, his scores went down that second time without the worksheet because it was just too distracting for him to go through the process of asking himself questions, remembering the questions, searching for answers while he was reading. And I just think it wasn't a very good fit with his learning style. As well as that, this lesson did take longer than the first one, as I did conduct that interest and priorities questionnaire at the beginning, and that took longer than we thought it would because we talked while we were doing it. And then his siblings kept coming in and out of the room, and that was really distracting for him, and he didn't want them to be there. He didn't want to see them, and he didn't want them to see him getting help. And I think there was a lot more going on that lesson, and I think that played a major part, and he was tired of it by the end of the lesson and wanted to be done and wanted to move on. So that is something that I think is important for me to consider in that second IRI, is just that he was also ready to go. Throughout, his word recognition scores were all right. Across all 3 times we met, he fell under the instructional categorization according to Pearson. These percentages are seemingly great and fairly consistent, and they do place him solidly within the grade level. But that grade level is 7th grade, and this would be fine, but Jonas is about to enter the 11th grade. So I conducted a word recognition inventory from the Bader Language and Reading Inventory to see if this would corroborate with the other data. In this assessment, you start at a level in which the student can say each word on the list without any errors. I just started Jonas on the bottom level and moved up, and then you move through the levels until 4 or more words are missed. At grade level 6, Jonas missed 1 word, and then grade level 7, he missed 4, and this places him at about grade level 6.5, or what you would expect a 6th grader to read at in the spring. This is problematic considering his actual grade level. It can be assumed that Jonas's poor word recognition skills have a direct and negative impact on his performance in his classes in high school. Moving forward, I would focus entirely on building Jonas's word recognition skills. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to message me on Canvas and I will get back to you as quickly as possible. Included here is a special thanks to Pearson and Bader for the reading and language inventories that I used, and Louisa May Alcott for writing Little Women, which I used throughout the interventions with Jonas. Also included here is credit to where I found the template for this presentation. And then here is just my citations and the 2 studies that I based my decisions on for the interventions that I used with Jonas. Thanks.